Welcome to the Scholar's Chair. It was Ismail el-Farouqi who wrote, "The Ummah is a universal social order of Islam, whose membership include the widest possible variety of ethnicities, but whose commitment to Islam binds them to a special social order." Tonight, we shall discover the nature of the Ummah and the writings of Dr. Ismail el-Farouqi with Muslim scholars Dr. Imad-ad-Dean Ahmad and Dr. Safi Kaskas, right here in the Scholar's Chair. Dr. Ismail el-Farouqi, Muslim scholar, has written this book on el-Tawheed, and I have your opinions of that book. But I want to get your views on the principles of the Ummah, which he writes quite extensively about. What is the Ummah for you? What are the principles of the Ummah?
The Ummah for me is what ties the Muslims throughout the world together. Principles, best interest, beliefs, all these values that Muslims hold dear to their hearts and they share will make them into one Ummah. So an Ummah, as far as I'm concerned, is what ties me and the Indonesian brother together. So when I see him and say Salamu Alaikum, and he say Wa Alaikum Salam, I know we belong to the same Ummah.
And what does Assalamu Alaikum mean?
Shalom Aleichem, peace be with you.
Peace be with you. Imad-ad-Dean, your view?
I think in the Islamic discourse, the Ummah is defined just the way that Professor Kaskas has said. However, I think that the word itself has also been used more broadly. It comes from the word for mother, having a common mother. And so a family is a form of Ummah, the clan is a form of Ummah, the tribe is a form of Ummah, the nation is a form of Ummah. But I think Farouqi would say that society is the term that comes closest to what the Arabic word Ummah is used because of the element of volitional membership.
You have to choose to be a member, essentially.
You choose to be a member, that's right. And therefore you are tied in strongest, well, actually not only strong, you're not tied in by ethnicity, you're not tied in by a literal common mother, you're not even tied in by a common mother tongue, although some people seem to think that you have to speak Arabic to really be a Muslim. But rather, the contrary, you have identified with that which makes one a Muslim and become part of that society.
And what would that be, Dr. Kaskas?
What would that be?
Yes, what would be the unifying principle that would bring the Muslims together?
Yes. Well, first of all, we have Tawheed that bring us together. And then we have the Sunnah. And
now, what is the Tawheed? Because I have English speakers here.
Yes. Tawheed is unification. Is a term that refers to God being one, and Muslim recognizing that without any exceptions. And it's a principle that we share with other Abrahamic faith. We all believe that God, the Creator, is one. And this is a founding principle of Abrahamic religion and indeed of Islam. Islam is kind of more specific, more focused on this principle than any other principle in Islam. Yes.
I quite agree. And I want to go further and explore Farouqi's definition of social order in relationship to the principle of Ummah. He seems to say that the phrase in English, social order, is probably the closest definition to the definition of Ummah. You agree? Or?
Well, that's what he says.
Yes.
I mean, you describe his idea properly, but social order also extend in his mind, the way he described it in the book, as as fascism, for instance. It's a social order.
Yes.
Nazism is a social order, and he rejects them, by the way.
He does,
And
yes.
yes, and he talks about communism, and he rejected also. He's saying all these are unlike Islam. They will, the understanding of Ummah includes everybody, is not based on ethnicity, on race, on geographical location, anything that would limit the idea to a particular group of people. He's saying Ummah is a humanitarian concept that includes all human beings.
All human beings,
Those that are Muslims today, and the rest who might be members of the Ummah later. So in a sense, he's probably hinting to the fact that Muslims, as part of their religion, their faith, is to encompass others, to be kind to others, and to be exemplary to others in order to bring them closer to their same faith.
Is the Ummah include everyone?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think in Islamic discourse, although one could argue that Ummah is used to refer to the community of Muslims,
Yes.
the fact is the definition of what constitutes a Muslim can be narrow or broad. Tawheed is the essential element. So if you believe La ilaha illallah,
Okay, which
then
means?
that there is nothing worthy of worship except God, the creator of everything, the God of Abraham, then you are by definition a Muslim. But there's a narrower definition of the Ummah, which actually is probably better categorized by the word millah, the millet Muhammad, the community, religious community following the Prophet Muhammad, which is the second part of the Shahada being the declaration of the faith. The first part I just said.
Yes.
The second part is, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. So if you say, believe that there is nothing worthy of worship except God, then you are a Muslim in the broad sense and a member of that broad community. If you, in addition, believe that Muhammad is the messenger of God, then you are a Muslim in a more narrow sense and a member of that narrower community. But I do agree that that mankind is considered a brotherhood. Again, going back to the Ummah coming from the word mother. So if Ummah means having the same mother, then all your brothers are part of your Ummah. And who are our brothers? Well, the Quran refers to the brotherhood of the religion, the brotherhood of the faith, and it also believes to the brotherhood of kinship. And it repeatedly points out that we are all descended from Adam and Eve, and therefore we are all brotherhood by kin.
Interesting. Further?
By the way, there is a famous saying of Imam Ali. May Allah be pleased with him. He said, all people are your brothers. Either your brother in faith or your brother in humanity. I think that defines it.
Yes, I concur. Would you think that the Muslim world, if there is such a thing, is struggling with that idea today?
Yes, the Muslim world definitely struggles with this. The Muslim world is Islamocentric at this time. Most of it believe that if you're not a Muslim, you're doomed. And I totally reject that idea. And one of the reasons I live in the United States is to have the freedom to think that everybody is my brother. I love to associate, my neighbors are Christians, Jews, no religion, and I love all of them. And I think they're all my brothers. This is the Islam that I have that is not ethnocentric. And I believe the model I follow is the model of Medina, of Prophet Muhammad. He built a society that is pluralistic, where people from all religions are equal, and they were equal in the constitution that he wrote for that Medina. When they came to give him allegiance, he said, based on what? Islam, all relationships are contractuals, all relationship. So if you want to give me allegiance, you want me to lead you, we have to have a social document.
Yes.
And this was like 1,200 years before Montesquieu. What's his name? No, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So he wrote the Constitution of Medina, and where everybody is equal, including in that document is freedom of conscience.
Yes.
People can worship without any limitation to what they're worshiping.
The freedom of conscience.
Absolutely.
I would add to that, because not only is it true that Muslims are today are unfortunately exclusionary in their understanding of the Ummah, but also even in their desire of who should be included. I'm thinking of the law in Malaysia, where they passed a law prohibiting Catholics from referring to God as Allah. So they're saying, not only do we want a dividing line that, that marks you as outside and us inside, but we also don't want you to use any language that might obscure that dividing line, which is absurd because, of course, Arab speakers know that Allah is the name of God used by Christians, Jews, and Muslims who speak Arabic.
Yes.
Right. That's fascinating how people work at dividing folk. Tell me about this contrast that Faruqi makes, trying to show a contrast between the word community and the Ummah. He goes to the extent of talking about that community invariably means your close physical relationship to others, and the Ummah is.
Well, this is an example of his writing decades ago. All right, even though I would not have agreed with that even then. Today, when we have an online community and people consider themselves affiliated strongly in people that they have not only never met but who are on the other side of the world, it now seems like a silly definition of community to make. Right. So I do not agree with that, and I think that nowadays it's at best outmoded.
Would you say that the salient point, the point that's worth benefiting from, and I just add my own philosophy here, is that the community is not sufficient enough to define the Ummah, as the Quran is referring to it.
Look, when people are, when Faruqi or anyone else is trying to make a point about the Ummah, then they're going to want to say that, well, the word community is not sufficient. Right. But I don't, but that's just a question of how you want to use words. We get to define our terms. Yes. And therefore, I don't think it's necessarily true. It depends on how clear you are in your yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Let me mention what the Quran says about Ummah, because I learned from the years I spent translating the Quran that we cannot just throw the Quran into the conversation without being specific on what we mean. The Quran clearly mentioned the word Ummah in the ayah 92 of Surah Al-Anbiya. إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. This is your Ummah, one, united and integral. This is a commentary by Dr. Faruqi. And I am your Lord, serve me. I have to tell you that Quran never defined specifically what is an Ummah and who is a member of the Ummah. He left that to us. The Ummah is mentioned in the Quran to serve us. We are not there to serve a concept of an Ummah. So as long as the Ummah can serve us, we can talk about it, work on it, develop it, and it will change based on place and time. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in his concepts here, Dr. Faruqi was ahead of his time.
The 1970s.
Yes. Some concept he mentioned here were fantastic, were ahead of their time. Some others became antiquated because we left them behind and moved forward. Like right now, I'm a part of an important community, a cyber community, where I have friends, relatives, neighbors. We visit every day. We talk every day. I teach there. I use it as a. They accepted me as a teacher, so I teach there all the time, and I enjoy it. So those concepts are also concepts that are invented by us to serve us. So he was ahead of his time at one time, and right now we need to look again at what he's talking about. I mean, I can go on, and probably the question will come in the interview about the Ummah and its characteristics. He is definitely revolutionary there, but he did not take in consideration anywhere the example of Medina. You see, to me, constructing a state begin and end in Medina. I believe that experiment led by the Prophet was the first implementation of what he understood the Quran to be in his time in that place.
The practical application of establishing a community or
the first application based on time and place, based on the people he's dealing with, the time they're in, the general knowledge, their understanding of social life. Here, Faruqi forgot totally that the basic unit in Arabia was a tribe. And the Constitution of Medina changed the loyalty from tribal into national. We cannot overlook that. This is probably the most revolutionary concept that ever happened in the history of a human being. That Constitution of Medina brought people, Arabs, that know nothing except tribal loyalty, and told them, now your loyalty is to the state. The first constitutional article of that constitution says, we are a nation among nations. It declares sovereignty and independence, right there. We are a nation among nations. We're no longer a tribe. And anybody that comes to us is a member of that nation. He didn't use the word citizen, because it's a new concept. But he said, you're a member of this nation. The weakest among us, the poorest among us, can obligate all of us. Like if you're one of the Quraysh people that were fighting the Prophet, and you come to any member of that community and say, protect me, and he accepts to protect you, the whole nation will have to protect you. That's fantastic. And then freedom of conscience. And on top of that, gave respect to everybody. Even those that were idol worshippers were equal citizens. It's fantastic.
It is. In
so
fact,
we cannot overlook this in 1970.
But it makes sense. It has greater resonance even in today's political experiences. The Ummah, as Faruqi writes, is a universal society. Do you agree with that assessment, Dr. Imad-ad-Dean?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the, and this is where the point that Professor Kaskas just made, is right to the point. The model is the Medinan city-state. And in that Medinan city-state, everybody was, and even though it's true, the word citizen didn't exist then, but the thing is, functionally, what is he talking about when he talks about the members of that community? He's clearly not talking about just the Muslims, because he says all of the members, whether they're Muslim or not, have the same duties to protect the community, the city-state, and that all of them will have their rights protected, including the right to practice their respective religions, even those who had not yet left polytheism, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. So he's talking about citizenship, even if he didn't have the word for it. And
in what way? Their responsibility to the law.
The responsibilities to the defense of the community,
right,
and the protection that the community will give them. Now, of course, I'm not saying, I'm not going to claim that the Muslims and the non-Muslims had equality.
Right.
Although, if you analyze carefully, in the beginning, they practically did have equality, because the idea of things like the jizya and so on, that came later. That came later.
The document itself give them equality.
In the document.
What came later, it's total disregard to that document.
Right.
Now, what document are we referring to?
The Constitution of Medina.
Okay.
The Medina Compact.
Mithaq al-Medina.
Which was the agreement under which Muhammad would lead the community, and under which all the citizens pledged their. Again, see, I don't think you can avoid using the word citizen, but they would. But the members of the community pledge their loyalty to the community. They do so by agreeing to this written document, and as he says, when you look at the written document, you don't find these things. Now, I don't want to use the word disregard myself because the jizya is mentioned in the Quran. But the fact is, it was revealed later.
It's a later development.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it good or bad. It makes it a later development.
It allows for the possibility of, it allows for people to remain citizens without having the duty
To
of
fight.
fighting for the community.
I see.
Because there are situations where you don't want to have to fight against your brother, your uncle, your cousin, whatever.
And to pay the
and you're-
taxes, they could
and you pay- Yes.
you pay the tax
Yeah.
it's in lieu of military service.
That's
This
right.
is the thing. It's not a although many Muslims unfortunately think it's a tax of humiliation, but that's not its purpose.
At
The
all.
purpose, and the fact that that's not its purpose is shown that even after the Quranic verse comes down, where there were Arab tribes who would say to Umar, for example, and Umar was very strict in his application of Islamic law. No one can say otherwise. Said, we are too proud to pay the jizya. We want to fight, and we will fight to defend the community. And so he made a treaty and said, fine, you pay no jizya and you fight.
You fight. So it wasn't to humiliate non-Muslim. It was to protect. You don't have to fight for a Muslim state. You just pay a little bit of money, stay home safely, continue to do business. We'll fight to protect you. But if you want to come and fight, you don't have to pay anything.
Also, the fact that those
Sacrifice
people who were
everything.
not required to fight didn't have to pay the jizya. Women didn't pay the jizya. The disabled didn't pay the jizya. Children didn't pay the jizya.
And at some point,
So-
I believe in the evolution of this law, there were clergy that didn't pay it as well, right? Did I understand that correctly?
We're not supposed to have clergy in Islam.
Yeah, we don't have. Well, I think he means
Monks,
he
the
means
monks,
the
the
of the
monks
people,
Oh,
the
oh,
other
oh.
people,
Non-Muslims, yeah.
the non-Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah,
glad you
I don't.
mentioned that.
Other religions.
No, since you
I can't
since-
speak to that.
Since you opened the door to it, there is a question that states quite clearly there is no clergy or laymen and a laity in Islam. And why is that, do you think?
Because every Muslim is supposed to be knowledgeable about his religion.
To lead to
Because
prayers and-
everything, because including women. Because Quran, in the Quran, Allah mentioned that He made that book easy. Easy. Easy means anybody can read it, understand it.
Yeah.
They don't have somebody to interpret it to them if they take enough time to read it. But if they don't take time to read it, if they always defer to a scholar, so-called scholar,
yes.
to tell them what the Quran says, it'll become like he is interfering between them and God to interpret God's words.
I see. Yes.
Yeah.
It becomes.
The point is that there's no class of people who are invested with special religious authority.
Yes.
Religious authority, to the degree that it exists, is earned. That, for example, if you are a scholar, if you're a hafiz of the Quran, you memorize the Quran.
And the
It's
community
because
has
you
to
memorize the Quran.
Yeah, but the community
It's not
has to
because
recognize you as such,
The
yeah.
community has to recognize you as such. If you're a mujtahid who does original, legal thinking, it's because you have studied the law books and you have studied the Quran and the Hadith, and you're in a position to do that. Even if you're just the imam who leads the prayer, it's because the people who follow you recognize you as someone with
You have to have,
piety and knowledge.
there are criteria there that people agreed on, like you have to have age, you have to be someone who memorized the Quran. They're criteria.
But it's not a matter of
not,
investment. It's not a
yeah.
matter that some human authority
Yes.
has said, you are
Yes.
you're a priest and you cannot be a priest.
Yes. Or a uniform that distinguish you from others.
Right, literally investment.
I got you. Literal clear demarcation.
Yes.
I'm very interested in the glue that holds the Ummah together. Tell me more about that, because it seems to me that, I was looking at this idea of a Sharia, and I was noticing that there was not one religious law that was a document that you could point to in all the countries that are predominantly Muslims and say this is Sharia, a single idea.
Yes. You want me to talk about the glue?
Yes.
Yes. There is no glue at this time, but should be.
Okay. All right.
Actually, the glue that should really keep us together as an ummah
Yes.
is shahada, both shahadas
Yeah.
that he mentioned,
Yes. Both
both
phrases. Yeah.
shahadas, the Quran, that we all agree it's the word of God and we all recognize as our book, and we all agree that it's never been tampered with. It's exactly the way it was revealed. And some of the Sunnah, because there is some people that agree and some disagree on the elements of that Sunnah. Anyway, that should be the glue. If this is the glue, then why aren't Sunnis and Shias together?
Right, right.
If this is the glue, why are we talking about Arabs versus non-Arabs? If this is the glue, why are we divided?
Nationally.
Why are we divided? We shouldn't be divided at all. We should be able to get together every year. See, the project that Dr. Farouk is talking about here is a United Nation, he said. He called it a United Nation. I call it a little bit even better than that. It's an Ummah should have representative coming from every single part of earth that has Muslims, sending a representative to meet once a year. That could be during Hajj or after Hajj, and decide what is in the best interest of the Ummah. Once we decide, we go and implement. That should be theoretically sound, should be practically doable, but we're not doing any of this.
Yes, yes.
And that's why we're fragmented. That's why others are not only fragmenting us, like Sykes-Picot fragmented us. We even there are powers now that are fragmenting the fragmented.
Yes.
And we keep getting worse and worse and worse and weaker and weaker and weaker all the time. So to talk about an ummah that is solid is a fantasy today.
I see.
You know?
It's the work in progress, huh?
To face reality, we really need to be able to sit together, agree on the basics, and really be honest about it. Is strength in our best interest? This is what makes us strong. Once we decide, let's do it.
Yes, yes. Interesting idea. I like the idea very much. Tell me about this idea that Farouki brings up in his book that becomes a social problem. It says that Islam's social order is against ethnocentrism. Do you agree with this, Dr. Imad-ad-Dean? Is Islam against ethnocentrism, and why?
Well, fundamentally, I think that's correct. Although I would be concerned about people taking it too far and to try to deny that there are ethnic, that there are ethnicities at all.
Yes.
Rather, these are some things that to be recognized and to be cherished. As the Prophet said, diversity is a blessing to my community. The problem is when people try to make one ethnic group to be superior to another, or same thing in this context, more Islamic than another. And there are, I mean, if I'm going to speak frankly, I will say one of the things that most distressed me about my visit to Malaysia, which is otherwise a beautiful country with beautiful people, and I love them, but the Malay tended to see the Malay as the Muslims. And that the others, especially the Chinese, but also to a lesser degree the Indians and the others, that, they are not Muslims, even to the point that they wouldn't be interested in converting somebody, which is because this is not for them. It's the religion of the Malays. Now, this is quite surprising, since you, of course, have Arabs who think it's the religion of the Arabs. So I was that was the thing that distressed me. So to say that, and then I've seen it elsewhere. One of the things, the unities of Islam should be across racial lines. And yet in this country, I see a kind of feeling of superiority among some of the immigrant community over the African American community.
Yes, sure.
Even though it's...
And so do we. We see some superiority over immigrants.
That's interesting.
We have people who look down on the immigrants. So.
Well, okay, fair enough.
Stupidity is stupidity.